Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about result and process. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, what are your thoughts about result-oriented and process-oriented developers? Well, my thoughts are usually that, as with most things, it is in the execution that we determine how well something's going to work or how well it's not going to work. And stupid people will always cause problems, regardless of if they claim to be process oriented or result oriented or whatever orientation you might have. The main killer to all human progress is stupidity, or it is the red thread through most things, as I like to say. Because I know it is something that is difficult for a lot of us to come to terms with, but the quicker you come to realize that most people who are quote unquote against you, or they're bad people, or they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing, etc., etc. Some people are absolutely doing things for bad reasons and so forth, but on average I always find that stupidity is the thing that causes most of the issues. And in engineering and IT, it's usually the case. It's not that often that you find a situation where an ideology is the way forward in I've never seen any definitive proof that an adherence to a way of thinking has any real effect on the end it has no definitive value to the end result. It is always in the ideas themselves that I find what I like to call the wisdom, and the wisdom of how to to take the next step. That sounds really fluffy, but let me kind of walk you through my thought process on this. So when I say a stupid person is always going to cause problems, it basically means that if you say something as, well, I hate process, what you're actually saying is that you hate being bored and wasting time. But the process does not have to be long and boring or unnecessary. So, because by that logic, then, well, we should simply skip all the process related to things that are what I would call fairly sane. It doesn't even have to be IT. If you skipped all process, well, then medicine would have no testing. We would not check the quality of our, of food or anything like that. There is, I think we can all agree, regardless of if you like to work as a result-oriented developer or a process-oriented one, that some measure of process is necessary, because there are requirements on a workflow which can only be fixed by having a human process. You can't automate everything. It's that simple. And at the same time, if you claim to be result-oriented, well, what I find is that the extremists who claim to be result-oriented, they are they very often act a little bit as the rebels. It's almost like, religious, and a process person is a religious person, whereas the result-oriented one is almost the atheist in the group. Where if they're extreme about this, they usually cause a lot of friction, because they get usually very frustrated when things take a long time, and in many cases they might write really shitty code or things like that, because they want to show, they want to make progress. They're addicted to progress of things, which is, it's a noble, it's nothing is wrong with progress, but if you really think about it, if you only adhere to that sort of doctrine, then you have the situation we have in many places of the world, where profits is the only thing that matters, and because it's the only thing that matters, everything else falls to shit. Because when you're selfish, because that is usually what happens at the end of the day, when you're, depending on how you interpret these words, right, then you start damaging the whole in favor of what you are doing as an individual, which is a classic one, especially in software developer, where like the software developer becomes an individualist who only cares about like their own personal progress and so forth and so forth. They don't play as a team, they play as an individual person, right? And none of these two scenarios are good for the company or for the team or for the overall happiness and productivity of anybody. And that's why I like to say that the way, like, it sounds fluffy, but the wisdom-oriented developers or pragmatic masters, or call them what you want, these are the only software developers that I would trust to do a good job without any type of supervision from such a person. And the reality is, guys, that, as I said, being more into process or being more into results, or like, you know, just kind of getting on with it, doesn't make you nobler or worse than the other person, because it is, as I said, it's the execution that matters. If you are too deep into the process stuff, you're going to waste a ton of time for everybody, and you're not going to get anywhere, because you, as I like to say, you're a philosopher. You have decided that this is a good idea, and you will bend your world view until you see what you want to see. I have worked with some process people, guys, who are so indoctrinated into this mindset that they can't see that nobody wants to do the thing that they like. But it's their religion, basically. And the same thing goes for the people who are quote-unquote result focused. They get fired because they're dicks to everybody. And that's also not a good idea. So there is always a balancing act to these sorts of things. They're not opposing, they are both required in order to achieve these results, which I think is sort of, well, as I said, I've never met an intelligent and wise person who doesn't understand that you have a need for a measure of both of these, because you need a process of some sort, some type of agreement on how to do things in a team to work as a team, and you have to produce results, because otherwise the company goes under. So, as I like to say, the being extremist is very rarely the sane thing to do. I've never seen it happen. It's always the middle somewhere, or it doesn't have to be the middle, but like making an informed decision on like actually looking at the results, because a certain amount of process is necessary. Too much is bad, too little is bad, just the right amount is what you need. And being result oriented, absolutely, but not at the expense of every single not at the expense of quality checks and these sorts of things that is supposed to help and support you in producing better results. So what I want you to take away from this is that well, if I'm gonna have to pick myself, if I would identify with one of these two, so I would say on the scale, if there is a scale between results and process, then I'm more leaning towards the result. But as I said, it's not because I don't believe in process. It's about finding the right amount of process, and knowing how much process is necessary comes down to your personal wisdom. How good are you at your job? And that is something that the result-oriented people can take home with them and ponder a little bit. Because if you are a result-oriented and you don't understand what the right amount of process is for your team, and you see and people are unhappy with how things work within your team, it is most likely because, as I said, because you are too far into the result-oriented area of whatever you're doing. And there is such a and to me it's sort of, I always found that funny, because I also could identify as a result-oriented programmer, but I can also understand that in order for me to reach my results, I sort of have to have some process-oriented stuff in place. So it's the wisdom, as I like to say, the wisdom or the stupidity of a person that determines everything, because any solution, regardless of if it's the most genius solution in the world, will fail if given to, is put in the hands of people who don't know what they're doing. And almost any situation is solved effectively by someone who applies wisdom. And wisdom is not in saying I'm result oriented or I'm a process oriented, like, you know, any of these sorts of classifications. I'm not saying that people are giving themselves those classifications. I'm just saying that wise people, intelligent people, understand the problems that they are solving and understand and can spot an effective solution when they see one. Have a great day.